is all a series of 27 stories, but 3 of them were about when my mother passed away. And that was this critical moment that I had to write. And it was beautiful. I just wrote it down. So you have to be passionate about what it is. And that can be just about as much about business as it can be a memoir. But that reason to write is, I think, a really, really important element of it. So other little pieces were things like knowing your audience is absolutely critical as well. And narrowing your audience as much as you can, because as soon as you do, things get clear. And if there was one tip on, and we can chat about stories and different pieces as we go through this, one tip would be know what your story is about. Because right after people share a story with me, the very first thing I ask is, what is your story about? And it's very rare that anybody can tell me really succinctly what their story is about. Mainly because they're about all kinds of things. If it's a relationship story, it could be about trust. It could be about freedom. It could be about loyalty or vulnerability. All of those elements could all play a part. But if you decide on which part of that you really want to explore, then your stories get really tight and succinct and are much, much easier to write. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to our next panelist. And I look forward to kind of chatting and helping you guys have ideas about what you're doing and ways that might be able to help. So I'll pass it on now.
Awesome. Thank you, Matthew. So Donna, share with us.
Yes, I love going after you, Matthew. First of all, I have a huge smile on my face from listening to you. And I think that stories are so important when we do our writing. So I'm looking forward to hearing more. And I also want to say that I work with a lot of people who aren't sure what their story is. And I feel that through writing, there's discovery and transformation, which helps us to even learn about that story ourselves. I know that Harry Potter author has commented that, when she's been pressed about certain characters dying, and she said, I didn't make that up. That's how the story appeared. And even though I write self-help, motivational, inspirational books, which are nonfiction, I have six books as well. I find that I learn a lot, not only about my topic, but about myself as I write. And many of the coaching clients who I've worked with have had the same kind of experience. My last book, my 6th book, was published by a mainstream publisher, and that one is As You Feel, So You Heal, a rite, W-R-I-T-E, of passage. And it's a part of I have a contract for 3 books in that series, and hopefully more on the rite of passage. So, if I had one tip, I would say that we're all unique, and that your way of writing may not be my way of writing. But what I feel is an advantage to working with anyone who's been through this process before is that there are certain things that can help you approach it and be ready for it. Like, you don't need 24 hours a day to focus on your writing, or even 5. I find that people can focus in 15-minute chunks and still get something valuable. And so I want you to honor your own process, whatever that is. And if you haven't gotten out of your way to begin writing, simply begin it. As many of us say, simply begin it and see where that takes you. I like to say, follow the thread. follow the thread and see where it will lead you. And sometimes it leads you to a place you didn't expect. I've worked with some clients who went in wanting to write a particular kind of book and ended up writing something completely different. I remember Julia Cameron, who's a very famous author on creativity, speaking about how she kept getting the guidance for a musical. And I won't even quote what she said about that, but she basically swore at her guidance and said, "No way, I'm not writing a musical," because she came from a very musical family and she was the only one who wasn't musical. Well, eventually she listened to the guidance she was receiving. She wrote that musical, which eventually was produced on Broadway. Just saying, gotta listen. Thank you. I'm passing it on.
Thank you, Donna. Awesome. Okay, Alexandra.
Hey everyone, I'm Alexandra O'Connell. Thanks for joining us today. I always love talking about books. I'm a big word nerd, so any excuse is a good excuse. My business is Your Resident Wordsmith, and I'm an indie book editor and writing coach. And like many of us in this industry, started out life because I loved reading, I loved books, and I loved writing. So these days I'm helping lots of other people get their books written and done. I took a strange detour for a while there as a medical editor, and realized while it appealed to the nerd in me that enjoyed learning new things, that really the stories were what got me. So I'm really excited to be back working with the books. And people come to me with a lot of anxiety about the kinds of questions that they have for writing. I've heard all those things, you know, I don't know what it's about. I don't know, you know, what are my best practices? What should I do? And being on both sides of this is kind of interesting because I can give people advice about what I think, you know, what I see working for other folks. And then I myself am releasing my own first book, which is a workbook about writing in a few months. And I was on the other side of the situation again. And it was a nice reminder of the ways that we feel really vulnerable when we're trying to put a story down. And it doesn't matter if what you're writing is fiction or memoir, which is, you know, kind of the hallmark of feeling vulnerable, or if you're writing a business how-to book. It's very difficult, and turning that over to someone else to take a look at for the first time is a really big step. So when people come talk to me, and I'm sometimes the first person, aside from maybe a close friend or family member, that they've showed this to, it's quite terrifying. So I want to reassure you that that's completely normal. And all of us treat your stories with respect, all of us who are, you know, care about the books, because we know what that's like too, on the other side, turning it over to someone else. So Liz's point about the marketing, I wanted to jump in on that too, because everyone has questions about how to market your book. And of course, that's very important. As an editor and as a writer myself, I will say one of the best ways to market your book is to start out with a good book. So the better you can write it, you know, the more work you can do up front to make it really, really good, the easier time you'll have connecting with your audience, whether that's something that involves giant sale numbers or not. But the better your book is from the word go, that is your number one marketing tool. What the story is about, as Matthew said, is a huge question that people don't, it's simple but not easy to answer. And that would have been one of my gold nuggets for you guys. But if I had to pick just one thing right now, I would say to recognize the difference between a first draft and any subsequent drafts and revisions. What we're doing often when we're writing the first draft and thinking about how inadequate it is, and of course you might be doing what Juliet Cameron did, you know, swearing at it, is that we're comparing our work in progress to someone else's finished masterpiece. So usually you're thinking about other books that you've seen that you think are really great, that they've done an amazing job. But the thing is that that's not their first draft that you see published. They went through rounds of review and revision and work. So there's a difference between what happens when you're first writing it down, which is where many of you might be today, and what happens when you have something that you can then continue to shape and improve upon. So really, my nugget is, if it's a first draft, the number one job of a first draft is literally to exist. It can be really, really messy, but that doesn't matter because now you have something to work from and to build upon. So cut yourself a break if this is your first draft and realize it's not your finished masterpiece. So,
good point.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to answering all the other questions you guys have as well. So turn it back over to you, Amira.
Fantastic. Oh my gosh. So I don't know about you guys, but I am super, super, super inspired by everything I've heard so far. So thank you. So we are just going to roll into questions, and I'm going to start with the first one that came in. Let's see, hold on. Okay, so first one is from Carol, and she asks, how do you find a good editor for your project, and what are some of the questions to ask? So maybe Alexandra, you can stay in place and respond to that first.
Yeah, sure, I can jump right in. So the number one way to find an editor is still word of mouth. If you know anyone that has written a book, and they really like the person or the people that they worked with editorially, I would speak to them first. So I'd contact your network first and see if they have anyone to refer. The second thing you can do is to look for industry editorial groups. So in Colorado, we have the Colorado Independent Publishers Association, which has a directory of service providers that you can check out. Disclaimer, and I should have mentioned this before, I'm the past president of that organization, so I guess I have a bit of skin in that game. You can also look at the Editorial Freelancers Association. They are at efa.org, and find editors that way. You can take a look at books, and the third way I would suggest is taking a look at other books that you admire and look at their acknowledgements page. Because most of the time when folks enjoy the people that they've worked with, they thank them in the acknowledgements. And then after that, getting in touch with a few people and speaking to them, because there are two big aspects to working with an editor. One of them is their professional experience and expertise, and the other is that that it factor, which is like the personal connection that you have between them. So definitely speak to anyone that you're thinking about working with. And in terms of questions to ask them what other books they've worked on. Ask them, especially if it's your genre, that's a really important thing. So different types of writing, different audiences have different expectations, different editors have different preferences. So asking them what other things they've worked on, not just because you want to see their portfolio, but because they'll be familiar with what it is that you're writing. And the process by which they like to go about working. I'd say those are the top two things to ask them for sure. What experience they've got, what other books they've worked on, what genres they've worked on.
I would add to that and say, ask them if they can do a sample edit. Do you do that, Alexandra? Yeah, I found my editor by a sample edit, and she's done my last 4 books. And because the first 2 I wrote, I chose an editor, but I didn't know the types of editors that were out there, the deep content, and Alexandra, you probably have more knowledge about that. I didn't realize there were so many levels and layers and what they look at, or are they just looking for punctuation? So my first editor, the editor of my first 2 books, I only chose her because someone said, oh, I used her, and then I put her in my acknowledgement section, even though I hated working with her. I admit, we had such a terrible fit. It was an awful experience, so I put her in my acknowledgements, but because I thought I had to. I know, very sad. So I realized, you know what, I have to do something in a way that resonates with me, and I didn't ask those questions at first, and then the last 4 books, I got really smart, and I found someone who I could have that dynamic with and that great conversation with, that said, here's what happened to me and here's what I'm looking for. Are you it? And if you're not, don't worry. But I want to have that. And I got lucky and did find that. So ask a lot of questions. And don't worry about the cost. Don't make that your first or second question. If the fit is there and they're a good fit to edit your book, of course it's within reason, but don't base it on how cheap someone is or how expensive someone is.
And just touching on that as well, was I found an editor in New York, and she had these great credentials, and my book had a lot of humor in it, so I really wanted to have somebody who had skills with that area. And she did comedy, and her boyfriend was performing in these well-known groups in New York City and all the rest of it. And I sent it all off to her, or we did a sample. So I sent a couple of stories, and her feedback was she so wanted me to change certain stories. And that was fine, because I wanted to accept and have the editor help me with those things. But when I responded to her with some of my comments, which was, I could expand this story. I know it's only 3 pages long, but it's all I want to talk about. That moment was what was important to me. And I don't want, but she was always going, no, it needs to be more like a fit into this genre. It has to be this, it has to be this. And I was just like, well, I can't work with that. So I didn't go with her. And I did find somebody who, when I spoke about that, went, I get it. And that's fine. It's not, it might, there's that little ad rhythm and be different in the book. But so chatting to people is really important, because you will find the right fit. And it might take a little bit of time, but you'll be surprised. You'll probably realize very quickly when you find the right person.
Yep.
Yes, I wanted to comment that an editor is so essential. And I've been blessed to have good editors along the way. This last book being published through a mainstream publisher, I was intrigued by the fact that they chose a picture, an illustration for the cover that was different from the illustration I chose and my illustrator chose, and it ended up being the perfect one. So it's that perspective of having someone else's eyes and trained eyes looking at it and saying, have you considered this? And I would really look for someone who's going to converse with you and have it be a dialogue, not you must do this, because I have seen a couple of my friends who've published books and had editors who actually, in my opinion, ruined the book.
Mm-hmm.
So, you can't change the essence of the book, which is, again, important to find a really good person.
Yeah, and just to everyone's been saying this, just to highlight that for sure. I mean, any good editor should be there. What they should be doing is making you sound better. So if you get your work back from them and you see that it's different, and you say, wow, look at how amazing I am. That is the reaction that we want.
And you can get that in a sample edit too. You can be
exactly.
wowed in having somebody look at one chapter and go, oh my gosh, look what you did. That will tell a lot of the story. And then if you have a great connection, it's a perfect match.
Exactly.
And adding in on that, when I selected my editor, which was Donna DeNomme, and she's a local editor.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I know her.
Lovely. and amazingly talented. She's great. But she sent back the sample edit, and I read it, and I went, oh my gosh, it's so me. I mean, it still sounded like me. It didn't sound like an edit. It wasn't being changed, but it read so much better. But I couldn't tell you what she'd done.
Oh, wow.
I had no idea, because that's not my skill set. But she just moved things around and made the tenses right and did things, and it was. I knew instantly. So those, I think those are all kind of things to look for.
Cool.
That's awesome. All right, thank you. So Donna, I'm going to direct the next question. I'm going to have you kick it off, and the question is from Jamie, and it is, what has been your process for honing the exact topic or focus for your books?
Interesting. I came from a background where I went to a Catholic school for 6 years growing up, and I tend to avoid a formal, let's sit down and craft this into a box right away. So as I said in my opening, when I work with people, I help them find what is their path or their process. In terms of honing into my topic, it usually pops up. It pops up in a conversation. It pops up in a talk I might give. It pops up in a class that I'm teaching. And something I say or I hear resonates with me in a way that it lights up. Now, the one exception to this is the Rite of Passage series, because many years ago, after having said I would never buy a URL, I saw one come up for sale, and it was Rite of Passage. And I've been a ceremonial facilitator for 30 years. I've helped girls and women in their rites of passage. And this was such a perfect fit for me that it was like welcoming me home to that. So that would be probably my one exception to the fact of something, and I guess it's along the same lines in a way. You know, I look at what I resonate with and what lights up for me. I don't know if that makes sense to everyone, but it's, you know, it's like a sunrise. It's almost like you can hear the celestial choir singing, and I know that I'm on my topic or I'm on my title. And if I don't find that right away, I just keep writing, and eventually that emerges through my writing.
And for me, it's when I stop trying to come up with that, when it drops in. It's when I'm playing golf or going for a run. It's like, oh, yeah, I wish I had a pen. So, yeah. So I would say, just don't try so hard to find it. Sometimes it finds you in the strangest of moments.
Yeah.
And touching on that for me is, because I teach storytelling, I desperately need to write a book about how to tell stories. And I know I need to do that. And one of the larger markets that I work in is the legal profession, because of course lawyers have to tell stories, and it's an incredibly important part. And I coach defendants that are going to be put on the stand and things like that. And so I just should write a book about storytelling for criminal defense lawyers. And I haven't for years and years, and I know I need to do it, and I still can't. And then with this downtime, which is why we're really doing this, I was like, oh, this is the perfect time to do that. I need to write it. And I still couldn't do it. But then I decided, you know what, who do I really want to write stories for? And I decided on dads. And this is the working title, which is a working title. It's a little harsh for me, and I doubt whether it'll be there. But the working title is Dads, Why Do Your Stories Suck? And the idea is to help fathers be able to tell beautiful stories to their children so they can connect better with them. Nice. And as soon as I made that shift there, suddenly my passion to write and my passion to share with them was enormous. And I was off and running.
That's great.
And so passion, I think, is a huge part to something that you have to write.
Right.
Yeah, and the whole should've, the shoulding factor is terrible. And if you're thinking about writing something that's related to your business, there's a lot of shoulds, right? Oh, this will be great because it'll fit in with XYZ, product or service I want to push or whatever it is. It doesn't take us very far, though, as all of our other panelists have pointed out. It's great. I forget which author it was. I just saw something recently. Someone, a famous published author, says, well, every few years, I sit down to write something commercial, and then I throw it away because I can't stand it. So it really does have to speak to you. And it has to speak to you partly, it's going to be better. Your passion will shine through it if you really are enjoying your topic. And it's going to be easier for you to sit down and write it. If there's plenty of other reasons to have writer's block. I mean, we've all experienced this. Like, I really don't feel like sitting down today to write this. I can't think of the next idea. Banging my head against the wall. And you don't need to add to all of this the extra dread of, it's like going to the dentist. Oh, I should write about this topic. So yeah, it's got to be something that interests you enough that you're going to sit down for more than one day and enjoy poking around at it.
Okay, Alexandra, next question is from Diana. No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm messing up your name.
Because it's Diana.
Oh, it's Diana. Okay. Oh, it's beautiful. It's spelled so lovely. Oh, that's great. Okay, Diana. All right. What are the paths to purchase an ISBN number if we self-purchase? And does the editor work on the path of publishing, or is that a completely different thing?
Well, first, let's take the ISBN. So if you are planning to independently publish, that is, you're not going to be soliciting agents or big publishers to take on your manuscript, but you're doing it, which is most of the people that I work with. You want to own all the rights and you want to own your own ISBN. So if there is a service that you find online who says, oh, I can help you with all these parts of your publishing process, part of the fine print you should look at is who owns the ISBN. And it's really easy. If you go to Bowker, BOWKER, online, they're the ones who sell ISBNs. If you are planning, on the off chance that you're only planning to write one book, all you need is one ISBN. They're not that expensive. But if you think that there might be more than one, packs of 10 are reasonable as well. Before you purchase it, think about the name or imprint you want it to show up under. It is more professional to have a business name. Basically, you're forming your own little publishing company rather than having it show up as, Alexandra O'Connell on the copyright page. I prefer it to show up with a publishing imprint name. So then you just do a business name, you register your business, and then you purchase your ISBN under that business name. So that's a bit of the ISBN. And I mean, that happens pretty quick. If you're really early in the process and you're only brainstorming your idea or you're writing your first draft, you don't need to worry about jumping on the ISBN right away. So that you can relax on that score. And the second part of the question was what? It was the editor working with production?
Oh, does the editor work on the path of publishing, or are those two separate pieces?
Well, editing is part of the publishing process eventually. I think what you might be asking is the creative versus the logistical publication side.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and so what we're working with you on the content before, so we're working with you making the content better. Some people will also help you with the logistics of
the actual publishing.
The printer, ebook conversion if you want to turn it into an ebook, all that kinds of thing. It depends. Some services will do all in one. The actual editing, though, is the creative side of the process. That is so my work is mostly complete when I'm handing it off to the person doing the layout. And then, I know enough about it to advise people, and I have some excellent partners that I work with that take care of the production side of it, if that answers that part of the question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does anybody want to add anything to that?
I would highly recommend buying the ISBNs in bulk, because I think one was $250 and 10 was $275 or something like that. And I bought the 10 pack and had no idea I was going to use 6 of them. I had no idea. So I highly recommend that. It's worth it. But the difference between the editing piece and the publishing piece, like Alexandra said, they go together. But when the book is done and it's ready to go to the next step, that's when a lot of parts and pieces get involved. It's the ISBN number, it's laying it out, it's turning it into a Kindle, it's laying it out in hard copy, and then uploading it to Amazon, and all those pieces. They're not difficult, there's just many of them. But Amazon, Kindle, what do they call it now? Kindle Direct or KDP Publishing is through Kindle now. And you can't F up using them. You can't. They won't let you. You can't even upload a book that has the wrong margins or something is off. They will flag it, tell you about it, and you go correct it. It's so flawless. At least that's been my experience. If anybody else has used it, it has been 6 books of flawless uploading and having it look like a perfect book. They won't let it be any other way. Yes. Has anybody else seen that on Amazon?
I haven't used Amazon.
Okay.
I, like a general contractor, I formed as Alexandra was speaking about, I formed my own publishing house. I shopped my editors. I shopped my layout people.
That's what I mean. Yeah. Not meaning use Amazon for all of that. When it's ready to be uploaded, I meant.
Right.
Sorry
But
if
what
I-
I'm saying, Liz, is then I also hired the printer.
Okay.
So I did not use Amazon. I hired my printers as
Oh, and-
well. So I did all the little pieces.
Got it. Got it.
And the one thing that I feel pretty strongly about in this topic is that if you're looking for a one-stop shop, I would highly encourage you to ask other people who are published authors their opinion about that and who might be a good choice, because there are some very well-known big groups who handle authors in this way and handle them poorly. Mishandle them is what I
Amen.
would say.
Yes.
And I
yes.
don't like to speak poorly about people, and I won't name names, but I will mention that Matthew mentioned Donna, and I know that she does some of this work as well in Colorado. And there are other groups in Colorado that will help you with that. Or like Alexandra was saying, she has her people that she refers to. I'm the same way. I have layout people, and I have illustrators and editors who I recommend. And so reach out to people who have already done that before
Right.
you pay many thousands of dollars for a
Tens.
packet
Yeah.
and then end up in a loop where you're frustrated.
And touching on that, I agree with you 100%, and it is kind of some of the things that you would never really think about, because I had basically a local group of people that helped me who were amazing. But one of the things that was important to me was to be able to get hard copies of my books. And I didn't want to like order my own book from Amazon or something like this. It made no sense, but needed to be on all those platforms in different places. But the way it was ended up being structured is I have a printer up in Longmont who's amazing and will print however many books you need. And I would drive up and go and pick up books. So I would have books to be able to sell. And then one time I drove up and I was doing a talk or a speech in Houston, and they ordered 250 books. So I drove up and I signed them all there up in Longmont. And then he packaged them up and sent them to the hotel I was staying in. And they all arrived, and I just gave them the boxes of books, and it was done.
That's
so
great.
all those things are fantastically helpful. And they can be done, you know, you'll find the right teams and the right people, and we can certainly give recommendations of people
Totally.
that we work with, and we're happy to do that at some point.
That's awesome. And I'll just add that I'll be sending out a post email to all the attendees. So I'm going to include everybody's contact info, so you can reach out to them if you'd like. And,
Please, yes.
you know, pick their brain, or maybe just get referrals or whatever. So, okay, Liz, did you have anything else you wanted to add on that?
No, thank you for doing that, because I'm more than happy to hop on the phone with someone and they can pick my brain.
Okay, perfect. All right. So I have a couple more questions from the chat. Jessica asks, what are the best ways to copyright one's material if self-publishing, and is it really a simple process? Like, is it really just a few sentences, you know, copyright and you're done, or is there more to it?
I don't even understand that last part. Is it as simple as 3 sentences? 3 simple sentences?
I think what she's asking is, because sometimes, like I copyrighted something for Jeff BRC, and it was literally just like 2 or 3 sentences, and I was done.
Oh,
like
I see. Okay.
I didn't have to write a whole description and, you know. Okay, so does anybody want to chime in on that? What is the best way? I mean, is there any like special thing to know about this, or is it just really as simple as the normal copywriting process?
You want to go through the government website that handles copyrights.
Right, to the state of Colorado.
Okay, so again, I don't want to be the voice of doom and gloom here, but in a way I kind of am. When you Google that, you're going to get a bunch of ads of people who you can pay to help you through the copyright process. If you go to the government website, you will see the specific instructions, and it's like any other application. It's going to be pretty straightforward. Now, the only thing that we're kind of in a little interesting situation right now, I don't know if it's that department, but I would bet it is. I just had to request a certificate of residency for my foreign rights because I'm published in 10 countries, worldwide in Chinese and worldwide in Spanish. And when I went to that site, it's closed because of the whole coronavirus thing. So you may have to only apply now and then wait on the other side of this when they get those departments running again. Some of them that aren't considered essential are shut down, but it's really not a very long process. It's just like anything else. You have to read everything that's up there on the website. It'll walk you through it.
Right.
And I would add to that too, that I think a lot of reasons people ask about the copyright question is because they're worried for someone to come and steal their ideas. And sometimes I'll get this question too with authors when they, you know, I mean, if someone wants me to sign an NDA, I can, but honestly, ideas, and this is going to sound harsh as someone who like loves books and loves ideas, and I have like more ideas than I know what to do with on any given day, but like ideas are a dime a dozen. It's how you deliver them. And to Matthew's point, how you tell the story about them. That's what sells it, right? And so if you're like in an early draft, you know, the amount of work that it would take to convert, like you will know if you've tried to write a book, the amount of work it will take to convert that idea that you have into an actual like working, functioning manuscript story. But, you know, it takes work. So for someone else to be like, oh, let me do that work because, you know, this idea is just sitting out here waiting for me to do it, it's highly unlikely. So I just want to reassure everyone on that score. It takes work to do it. And most of us, you know, the people who want something easy for free, you know, like that's just more than you need to worry about most of the time. And you can worry about that at the point of publication, say. I mean, unless you're really writing about some specific, you know, biomedical or technical process, you know, something like that. I think that the concern, basically I'm reassuring you that the concern, you don't need to have that much of it. Because I think that's why people ask about copyright a lot. It's less dangerous than you think to write your ideas down.
And we can't copyright titles, which is why there are so many books with the same title.
Same title.
And that's why you might want to do a Google search for whatever title you're thinking of having on your book and see what else comes up, which you may or may not want to be associated with.
True.
Very
true.
Yeah. Same with URLs.
Yes.
You know, search a URL.
See what pops
same
up.
title, because again, same reasoning. Okay, so we're gonna jump back to the questions. So this question is from Craig, and it's back on the writing side. Are there hints for people that are creative yet very ADD to get the ideas down? I am very nonlinear. Me too, right? I relate to this, Craig. Craig is very nonlinear, and sitting down to write is very linear. He is a very good verbal communicator, and yet writing can be very difficult.
I'll take it. Thanks, Craig. Good to see you. As someone who suffers with that same thing, I, for years, told myself I could never write a book. I have too much ADD. I have too much going on. And I convinced myself I wasn't a writer until on my third book is when it really kicked in that I felt like I stopped making up those excuses, and anytime I felt like writing, I would just write, and then if I was a little distracted, I'd allow the distraction to happen, or I'd finish the thought and then come back to it, and then little by little I was able to sit longer because the inspiration came. It felt good having things be inspired and come through me. So it was almost like I trained myself from shiny object all over the place, and then I would get distracted. I taught myself how to sit and be focused for longer periods of time. So it got better and better. But I totally understand where you're coming from. You get distracted, and then you don't know what the hell you wrote or where the hell you were going, right? It's like, what was I thinking? So stay in that moment. If you get distracted, finish the thought so it's cohesive and done, then you can pick up. That worked for me.
Yeah. Can I ask a quick follow-up on that?
Yep, sure.
Do you ever like do a, scribble on paper and like, what am I trying, flow chart, or just kind of like bring write ideas all over, and then somehow from that, bring it into a more linear fashion, you know what I mean? Because that's how my brain thinks, is like, this, and then when I see it, I can see the correlations, etc. You know what I mean?
That's so strong, very smart to do. Even if it's a yellow, like a pad that you have, just write a topic. That could be chapter 1. Then what would flow to chapter 2? And then you might have another thought and go, oh, that could be part of chapter 3. That's how it worked for me. Was I had paper all over my office floor, and then I turned it into a table of contents, and then I was ready to roll with that. So that's excellent question. Yes, that's a good way to start.
And yet,
Thanks.
Craig, I still hear that you want to make yourself linear when you're taking what's on the yellow paper and trying to put it into an order. And I agree with Liz, that works very well. But what I would encourage you to do in the early stages of writing is simply pick one of those things and go on a tangent. Tell a story, follow the thread, tape yourself on your phone, and then transcribe it and learn from what you transcribe. Oh, I like this direction, or I don't. I think I'm going to veer over here.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
I think of a sailboat as I'm speaking to you right now, of a sailboat, and how when you're going on a sailboat, there are so many things that are affecting you, including the waves and the wind, and your boat and how it's structured. So it's not always like, let's make it go here. Sometimes you have to tack, to get where you're going in order to follow that wind. So follow the thread is what I say.
That's good.
Thank you.
See where it leads.
And on my side of it, I struggle with exactly the same as you, Craig, and it's very nice to see you. I know, Craig. Wonderful to see you on the call. I didn't really realize there was two things, and they kind of tie in with what Alexandra chatted about at the very beginning, with like first drafts and how do you get through doing something like that. But one thing for me was accountability, having an accountability partner. I was lucky enough to have Linda Klein, who's a dear friend and has been a business partner for years with me. And she kind of kept me just on track as I was going, but in an incredibly supportive way, and a fun and a humorous way. And so that was enormously important. But my deadlines, if you give me a deadline, I have an incredibly hard time trying to hit it. But if I have a performance, I'll do it. And so I ended up doing happy hour story time at the Forest Room 5 down on 15th Street, one of the strangest little bars, which I do love. In Denver, I think. And once a month, I would do a reading there. And I would promise each month to read 2 brand new stories. And then I would read 2 of the older ones that I was getting feedback and editing as I was going. And so I would be scribbling notes and doing that right before it. But it worked for me because I did it for a year and a half, and I created 27 stories, but that's the only way I could do it. It was difficult. Now with the new book that I'm working on, I'm looking for the next way to be able to hold myself accountable. And then also, so those are other ideas or other thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. Can I have one quick follow-up? What you just said, Matthew, about like having a deadline. And, I do speeches for a living, and there's no speeches. And so those speeches would keep me on task. Oh, heck, I had to prepare for this next Thursday or tomorrow or whatever. And now there's nothing. So this is more of I don't know what it is. It's more of a self-discipline question. How the hell, without those, like you were saying, Matthew, how do you how the you writers that write every day, it's amazing to me how you have the discipline. I just look at it as like a discipline, or
Yes.
is it a calling? Because I look at things like either push, like I feel like it's a push versus being pulled,
Ooh.
being pulled to write the story versus I got to push through it. So maybe some insight on that.
I think it's both. I think you are pushed and pulled. You can be very disciplined. You could wake up and say, I'm going to write for the first 3 hours of the day. And then some days that just doesn't happen. So you find your own discipline and when you're inspired. And then I do believe once you get going, it just pulls you along. But it's coming up with some sort of structured discipline that gets you started. And then that passion and motivation pulls you forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have an add-on to that. Like basically to get you started, finding ways to trick yourself into doing something. So most of us will have routines for various parts of our lives. Like going to bed routine will usually involve like brushing teeth or whatever. So there's these various cues that we have that, we know that eventually we're going to end up going to bed. And basically figuring out like, stacking up some cues for yourself can be, and basically that becomes your association. So whether that is walking into the place where you would be doing the writing or, making your special cup of coffee that you would have to take to the writing location with you, but finding ways to trick yourself, right? Setting up these little trigger cues, I think, is really helpful. And in the beginning, you have to think about it a little bit. So just make them really simple, like really obvious to you, whatever really works well for you. And after a while, they do generate their own momentum, as Liz says, like, but in the beginning, that's my little hack, I guess. Setting up some little trigger habits.
I would also consider, I agree with what everyone's saying about this, but I would also consider, why do you want to write a book? And you don't need to answer that question here, but for yourself, I would ask, why do you want to write a book? Because most often, the people I've worked with don't want to write a book because they want fame or fortune. If that's your motivation, you might have a little bit of a rude awakening around that one, because it takes a while to get to that place, I think. But if you're writing because you want to share something you know about, or you want to help people, I would say, what's going to happen to the people who are your people, who would be reached by your book if you don't write that book? And I have lots of stories, as I'm sure the rest of the panel do. There have been suicides that didn't happen because of my book or books. There have been marriages that have stayed together and people who have been inspired in a variety of ways. So what would happen if those books, they may not be the best books ever written. The English may not be even proper English in my very first book, right? But people loved that book. So who is the audience that's out there for you, Craig, and they're not being reached because you haven't produced that yet?
Thank you.
That's what I would tap into.
That's awesome.
And Craig, are you using your book to sell when you speak?
Yeah, but I've been speaking for 25 years and I have an improv book, but it's not really what I talk about. I have a passion, like you just said, about my topic of speaking, and people come up and they want more. So yeah, it would be feeding.
Perfect.
Like, hey, yeah.
And it doesn't have to be 200 pages. You could start with a small book that has 100 pages in it, or 80 pages.
Yeah.
Cool.
Could be a little pocket-sized book.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. All right, so we just have actually we're at the end of our hour. We do have just a couple other comments in the chat, and they are regarding self-publishing, layout and finishing, marketing, and then the horror stories that go along with that too. Yeah, and I've kind of combined two questions. So I know Donna, I know Donna knows a lot about this, and I think most of you guys do too. So well, everybody can see the question. So I'll just let you guys kind of address that, and then we'll wrap up.
No, we go until 2, I thought.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right. We go till 2. You're right. Okay, we have plenty of time. Never mind that. I'm sorry.
So ask that question again.
Okay, so I'm just going to read them. So the first one comes from Diane, and she says, I am a bookseller. I can tell you a few horror stories of authors who have mailed or dropped their books at my store hoping I would carry them. I feel so bad because their offerings are most often below par. Maybe Donna can speak about 1, self-publishing, 2, layout and finishing, and 3, marketing and distribution. And then let me just tag on. Karen said, I agree, Diane, that Karen's a book publisher and producing highly professional books is very important. I've seen self-published books that should have more love given to them. So in other words, if people aren't taking the time or spending the money that they need to spend or doing research in the publishing piece, and because of that, their books are falling short. Let's talk about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I kind of have 2 comments on that, and it goes in 2 different directions. And I know everyone on the panel can comment on this, so I'll try to be brief. On the one hand, I would say reach out for mentoring, you know, as we've been saying about everything else, because, well, I saw a book the other day, a children's book, looked delightful, had beautiful illustrations, and on the pages where the text was a box like this with gray behind it and the words typed in it in a very simple, probably basic font. What I'm saying about that is it looked like the author had gotten an app or something, uploaded the pictures. It provided boxes where she typed in the text. It looked like a delightful book, but it needed a graphic designer to lay it out. I work with a graphic designer who's also an illustrator. She knows a lot about books. So that's on the one end. But I really have to show you, because she wanted to come today. This is my very first book. This book was published in 2005. It is an unprofessional version of what I've done. This book in 5 months sold 1,000 copies. And the next year it sold 3,000 copies. There are people, I couldn't pry this book out of their hand if I tried. They loved this book. So what I have to say about that, and it wasn't edited, I just want to, and I cringe. I don't read it because I cringe when I read it. I thought I was writing it for my clients between their coaching sessions. And now it's in 10 countries, worldwide in Chinese and worldwide in Spanish. So my point there is just begin it. Even if it's unprofessional, and you will reach your audience. I do want to do a shout out to Diane, because her store was one of the few that sold this book. For heaven's sake, Books in Denver was one of the few. So she gives people a chance when she can and holds author events. It's a great place to do author events. So on the one hand, reach out. There are so many mentors. Karen Kilgore is a mentor as well, who's on the call. You know, there are people in the know. Reach out to us. On the other hand, don't let that hold you back. This book was published by a printer. The printer didn't know anything about publishing a book either. But do you know what? If it wasn't for that printer, I probably wouldn't be an author. So we all learn along the way, but we want to be grateful for the beginnings, no matter how humble they may be, right?
And there are definitely options out there. And what can't be helped is whether you tell a great story through your book or you don't. But that will just be how it'll be. And hopefully, and there's obviously helping people out there, but there are lots of people out there who will help do the layout and the graphic design work and all those crazy things like the number on the bottom of the page and what font is it in, and do you have a line on either side of the number, and what's the color of the paper, and what weight is the paper,
Yeah.
text and the font size, which will affect the page count, and all the rest of it. Nothing of which I had any interest in and could do. So I just had somebody else do it, and it's not necessarily that expensive. Now, somebody will happily charge you $15,000 to $20,000 to do it, but somebody else will probably will be able to charge you $3,000 or $4,000 or $1,500 if you find something. It just depends. But I think it's so important for the end of the book to look professional and fit. And things have really progressed over the years with self-publishing and so many people doing it, that there's lots of options to get that right. If you're geeky and you love to go and delve into that and get your ISBN numbers yourself and do it and start your printing company and blah, 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 do it. If you're not and you're like me, find somebody to do it. And they're all around, there's lots of them out there.
And to piggyback on that, Matthew, there are countless people. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't see a post on Facebook or LinkedIn that says, write your book in a weekend, or come to this workshop and you'll have a book by the time you're done. And really what you have is a giant piece of shit that you think is ready to be put out there, and it's not. But people are convincing people that this is a process that can be done in 48 hours. And it's not. You've got to, if you want it to sell, it's going to take a little bit longer. If you want it to just be a book that sits, then go for it for 48 hours. Because all you're really doing is just writing. Nobody's telling you, I need a little more here, or how about adding to this story, or that's great, but what are you trying to say? So I would just think a little bit more before trying to write your book in a weekend. There's a lot of hype around that. That's just my opinion. Yeah, sorry.
Well, that's okay.
I can get off my soapbox now.
No, I appreciate you saying that.
Do you agree, Donna?
Yes, wholeheartedly.
Okay.
Yeah, I can jump up on that soapbox too now that you vacated it. What you can write a draft in a weekend.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. Like, you can create something to get you started in a weekend.
Yes, but not your
You will
book.
not be able to get it edited, laid out. You'll get no beta reader feedback on it, no ideas about how to improve upon it in that weekend. Right. When I say, making things look good and professional, yes, obviously, I think that's the way to go. As others have pointed out here on the panel today, there are so many tools to make that happen these days. It's become much more accessible. It's become much more affordable. If you're writing a book that's really like a family history and you're writing it for your family, then you probably don't need to worry about all of these things.
Right.
If you want to have any other outreach for your book, though, then it is worthwhile thinking about it. And to Matthew's point about the things that we don't know, I mean, I know enough about layout to be dangerous, right? I also know how much I don't know. And I'd rather somebody who does know these things take care of it for me, because they will do all the things that I would never have thought about being important. All I had to do was read 1 or 2 posts about what layout designers think about when they look at a book to realize that this was never something that I was going to be an expert in. And I really appreciated their expertise. So yeah, it is worthwhile, and really, unless the book is for your own personal private purposes, to think about ways of making it good. There are a lot of people out there who can help you do it. It's become much more accessible and affordable. Yes. And I definitely am on that soapbox to please do it. Because, and then to the point, for the booksellers who are on the call today too, right? Like, they want to sell books. I mean, that's why they're there, right? And so you're helping them help you if your book looks as good as it actually is. And so that's my other play for this, right? When I'm working with somebody, I can help people make the story into an amazing story, and then they will work with someone else, or they will try to do it all themselves in terms of layout and other parts of the process. The end product might not look the way other professionally published books look, and it does not matter then really most of the time with how good the contents are, because most people do judge books by their covers. Most people will tune out if they see like 8 typos within the first 3 pages.
Right.
If it looks like a mess, people will assume it is one. And it's really easy for you to distinguish yourself from someone who took absolutely no time to make their book as good as it could be. It really does not take much for you to clear that bar to stand out.
Good point.
Anyway, I can vacate my soapbox now too.
Make room for me again.
All right, perfect. Okay, so Deshika has another question. Are the standards for self-publishing a business info product targeting a specific audience different from self-publishing a book intended to go mainstream?
Business
Yes.
info product.
Yeah.
So, yes?
I mean, short
Okay.
answer, like
Yes.
Yes, definitely.
yeah.
There's, yeah, they're different.
Okay.
And right now there seems to be a super big push to get people to write short little booklets on their, you know, their niche, an info product, and publish that. It's kind of, in a way, a business card.
Yeah, agreed. And I would say that there's a difference between, you know, what we call a book and what people recognize as a book, and what might be, you know, a booklet or a handout or a brochure. And so basically the basic question is, what do you want to do with this? Who are you trying to reach?
Mm-hmm.
What do you want to reach them? Like, what are you telling them? What do you want them to think, feel, do, say, remember? Like, what is the purpose of this existing? And those things are different if I'm creating a brochure versus a book.
Right.
And the only part I would say that might not be different, but is often missed, and that is when somebody does a how-to or a book, a business book, I often see that it's all data. It's all this, or processed, and it's all there. And the piece they miss are the stories. And I think that the stories in business books are so important. If you think of any of the business books that are out that have been really successful, invariably they'll tell you about the idea they have and why it's important. And then they will put a little story in that illustrates it in real life, how that affected them, or how they suddenly discovered this, or how this changed somebody. And then they'll probably tell you again the little bit of information about it. And so that would be the one thing that I think it goes through both types of books, whether it's going to be mainstream, whether it's this story element is how we basically remember information, we recall information, and it moves us to action. So certainly having those in both is, I think, a really critical element.
Thanks.
Amen to that.
Okay, so Craig has another question. How important is the title?
Very. I think it's very important.
Yeah, I think isn't the title sort of the call to action? I mean,
and it's like a good movie, or just like a good headline. Yeah, I would say that's my opinion, something that really grabs the reader.
Yeah, it makes you pick up the book and want to know more about it, right? Awesome.
Well, and I can speak to that too, because when my first book came out in its first form, it had one title, which was the thing that I always said to my clients. And then when I went to republish it, having an editor, having an award-winning graphic designer from SEPA, I actually sat down and visioned for a day and came up with a different title. And with that second title is when I started selling foreign rights to other countries, because they resonated with it. The first title, there was part of that title that people didn't get what I was talking about. So absolutely, I think that titles are so important. And in fact, as a reader, my disappointment is when I buy a book with a great title that then does not deliver in its content, which is another reason, not to be a broken record, but you need an editor because they'll tell you, oh, this is your title and this is the content. I don't get it. It's not matching.
They don't match.
What was your first title, and then what was the second title?
The first title is You Get You, Turtle Wisdom. And the turtle wisdom part of it was inspired and came from a call I had with a client. And it matched everything I was writing about, much like when you're creating a speech, Craig. And then what that became was turtle wisdom coming home to yourself. And the turtle happens to be revered around the globe as a symbol of resilience, which is what this book is about. Resilience, being true to yourself, thriving. And so it just took off when that happened.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking.
Doesn't look like we have any more questions in the chat, but if people have questions, there's still 17 people on this call, so chime in. But I'll throw a question out there. So we talked a little bit about writer's block. So what about writer's doubt, right? Because you hear people talk about like they're inspired to write a book, but then if they sit down to do it, then all this thoughts about, well, who wants to hear my story? Like, do I really think to say, do they even want to hear this? Am I any good? Like that whole process. Like, I'm sure that all of you have gone through that at some point. So what were some of the ways that you managed and the tools that you garnered through the years in your experience to get over that, to just like turn that part off just so you could keep going?
Excellent question.
One of my favorite quotes, and I actually scribbled it down when we were chatting about the first drafts and not getting your information down and pieces like that, was from Roosevelt. Who's the lady Roosevelt?
Eleanor.
Eleanor Roosevelt. That would be it. The
Lady Roosevelt.
The lady Roosevelt. Yeah, that one. Who was very wise. But she said, the quote was, "Comparison is the thief of joy."
Ooh, yeah. That's good.
And I was like, oh my gosh, we compare ourselves, or I say I compare myself to other people so often.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why do I do that? And of course you compare yourself to people who are doing wonderful things or different. And then for some reason it makes me feel less. And it's like, I had to kind of consciously stop doing that. So it was like, I would look at them and go, that is so wonderful and they're great. What can I learn from it? How can I help? How can I do something, but do it myself? And for me, it was always that. It was like, your information has to get out and your message has to get out. And you have to trust the fact that there are people out there, and there are people out there that need to hear what you have to say. And so you just have to have the courage to go and do it. But I was like, that was something I always came back to, because I was like, don't compare myself to some fantastic writer,
right,
or novelist. And it's like, that's not who I am. And if I do, it's just going to stop me from doing anything.
That's
so,
right.
You know, so that was one way I would tackle that a little.
Well said, Matthew. And I agree with that. And the doubt is going to slip in. Anytime we're ready to take a big leap or do something out of our comfort zone, that's the first thing we do. We want to doubt ourselves, go back into that comfort zone and say, I can't do it. I can't do it. And we stop ourselves. We put the brakes on everything that we're about to do. And it's getting past that and just saying, why not me? Why can't I at least just try it? I'm going to do it. If I like it, I may do another book. But it's pushing past the doubt and realizing you have something unique that has to be brought into the world. It's unique to you, and it's going to resonate with someone. There's so many people on this planet. Of course, it's going to resonate with someone.
I believe that we need to embrace that we need to acknowledge the doubt. We need to embrace it. And as a student, longtime student and professional in the field of psychology, I believe this is a universal thing. Most of us experience doubt, maybe not every day, but we experience doubt at some point. And so to embrace that feeling, to work with it, to bring it along with you. And I think the same thing in regards to the inner critic. And in fact, I have one time when the inner critic actually saved my butt, because she kept coming in, kept coming in, kept coming in. And this particular book, transformational book, included a few little snippets of my own childhood experience. And there was one story that I was telling in that book that was a little too transparent, a little too much of sharing. And that critic kept bugging me until I literally stopped the press. It was at the printer, and I pulled it back and I changed that story, and I've never regretted it.
Wow.
So I say, don't push those voices away, embrace them, and ask them questions, just like you're doing of this panel. You know, okay, all right, you don't think you're the one to write this book. Why not? Because you're not the best writer? I don't know about anybody else on the panel, but I'll admit I'm not the best writer.
I'm equally down.
Okay, so find out what is the doubt and why it's there. If it's there because you're just afraid of being seen, which is often what it is, then work with that. Work with that. But throw it into the pool and see who swims over to take a look at it. You'll be surprised.
Yeah, and I would say one of the things that I've used over the time has been, well, you know, like, why would anybody else care, right? That question. I don't ever have to show this to anyone. That's one of the things that I tell myself. You know, I'm writing this right now for me. I can come back to it later on and take another look at it and see, you know, whether I still feel like I have that question. But I'm giving myself permission to never have to share this with any other human being. And then I have enough of a drive, usually, like the realization over time too, that I will, unless I push through, it's never gonna exist. And I really want this story to exist. And in order for that to happen, I just have to make that mess. And then I come back to that first part, which is I don't ever have to show anyone else this mess. Really, if I don't want to do it, I can, you know, make a ceremonial bonfire in my backyard and burn those pages. Like, so that's a trick that I use, like giving myself permission to create it and then not have to actually go anywhere with it.
Yes.
So, and this is one other trick for myself, and that I always kind of think about, and that is with stories. And so the ideas or the stories that you're delivering out there, the reader isn't interested in your story. It's just the way it is. What they're really interested in is their own story that is triggered by your story. So our long-term memory that holds everything that we have, all those pieces are in there. The only way we can retrieve information from it is by association. So another way of saying that is cross-connection, which is why when you chat to somebody and you're talking to them, we constantly will interrupt each other. And if you think about how we've just done this, even on a panel discussion over videos, we'll interrupt and go, oh, that's right, because that reminds me this. What people are really interested in is their own story, because we're wonderfully selfish creatures. I mean, that's just how we are. And we love it if it's about us. So what you write is going to trigger things in other people, and they are going to love that. So for me, especially sharing kind of personal narratives and things like that, that was hugely important, because I was on the Uncle Nasty show once because a friend of mine produced it, Matt Need, which is a horrible show. And it was, for me, it was just not who I am. And as a storyteller, ridiculous to be there, because the demographic was 18 to 23 male. And I mean, it was there, and they were talking about like heartfelt, like personal narratives. And so I chatted with Uncle Nasty beforehand, before we went on, and he was fantastic and like so nice and super bright. And I was like, wow, this is great. Then he pushed the button, the on-air light went on. He goes, so this is stories about yourself, yeah? Well, what makes you so damn interesting? And that was his opening line. And I was like, all live on radio. And that's when I realized, oh, you know what it is? When I tell stories or I share them, nobody comes up and says, oh, I loved your story. They come up and go, oh my gosh, I had exactly the same thing happen when I was skinny dipping and ran across here. And they share me their stories, always share their stories. So that quite often it's like, for me, that gives me a lot of solace. It's like, okay, I'm not just being completely stupid and selfish. Other people are going to connect to these and find what's important for themselves.
Beautiful.
Awesome. Okay. All right. So we're almost at the top of the hour. We have 8 minutes left. So, and I have a few updates to do, but Deshika said, excellent feedback, thank you. What are the big differences between fiction versus nonfiction writing and sales copywriting? And then where is sales copywriting appropriate in business how-to guidebooks? First off, what is sales copywriting? Sales copywriting. Like, what is that term? What does that mean?
Well, copywriting is like, it's a hugely useful and important thing to do, especially if you're trying to sell anything. So it's an add-on. You can add that on to whatever it is that you're trying to promote, share.
Could be a landing page. Is
Yeah.
it? I'm not sure what that means though.
Websites.
Sales copywriting.
Yeah.
I didn't know if that was a technical term or.
Yeah, I'm not. It would be for websites and marketing material if you're trying to get a speaking engagement or somebody to buy your book.
The way I hear her question, Amira, is that she's asking, is there a difference between when a publisher copyrights your book and you copyright your book? And I would just go back to what I said before, to find the government website, and it'll walk you through that.
And that's the state of Colorado, correct?
No.
So it's the federal government?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
No, you're talking about
trademarks. I'm thinking about trademarks.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a state.
And a name, a business name.
Yeah.
And she may be speaking about what Liz was addressing, where it's content that you're copywriting. But the way I interpreted it, maybe she can clarify.
Yeah,
Is there a difference
Used for
between a
marketing
publisher
purposes.
and me doing it myself? And not really. It's the same process.
Okay.
Yeah. And I heard it as a copywriter, of which I have several friends and colleagues, and that's what they do professionally, is they're writing copy to help sell or promote something. And that is for websites, for brochures, for you name it, white papers, for advertisements.
Yeah.
The back of your book blurb is a kind of sales copywriting.
Right.
And so I would say that that's a real big difference between what happens inside the covers of your book, no matter what genre it is, and what's on the back cover are different animals. And that is an add-on to, I think, her question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right.
And of course, I heard of it as what's the difference between fiction and non-fiction, or if you're writing it, or if it's personal narratives and it's like a memoir versus making, a novel. And my answer to that is structure. It's like if you're relaying other people's stories or your own stories, the structure already is kind of in there because it really happened. Whereas if you're writing fiction, you better know what story structure is all about, because you have to make sure that it conforms to that for it to be successful.
Hold on.
Do you have a little four-legged friend that's...
I do. And she's just like, all right already, you've been an hour and a half and you haven't paid attention to me.
Great.
That's so cute.
She's right at my feet like, oh.
Okay. All right. So we have 4 minutes. So what I'd like to do, I do have some updates I want to share, but I want to just go back to the panel, and all of you guys take about a minute and just share with us your closing thoughts. So anybody can jump in, or I'll do my updates first and we'll end with you guys. So give you a couple.
Do that.
Perfect.
Yeah,
okay. So Jeffco BRC, we are still offering business advising. So we're doing that through Zoom. We've doubled our advising hours. Our advisor, her name is Lou Reverso, if you don't know her. She's working on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays now, and she can help you with everything having to do with running your business, or in this case, not running your business now for most of us. But this is a great time. Just because you can't work in your business, this is an excellent opportunity to work on your business. Okay, so she can help you with anything related to that. I'm encouraging business owners to take a look at where are your weak areas, right? We all have them, right? So maybe that's in marketing or social media, or maybe that's your books, right? Maybe the bookkeeping is a thing that's just kind of a burden for you. You're always putting it off. Let's hone those skills right now, right? Let's take this time, maximize the downtime you have, and really brush up on your skill set. So consider that. You just have to connect with me to set that up. And then we've also doubled all of our business online workshops. So everything's online, and the goal is to bring you 2 to 4 workshops every week. So upcoming, we have every Monday, we do a workshop from 10 to 11 called COVID-19, All Things Funding. So this is very much like today's panel. It's Lou Reverso, our business advisor, and then a gentleman named Jason Jacksack with Colorado Enterprise Fund. He's amazing. He literally is a wealth of information and just studies all the different funding programs. So we love partnering with him, and it's really just an open Q&A. And then also you can meet with Lou and she can help you navigate those funding options too. And I know the EIDL loan just closed out. The EIDL and the PPP, they just closed down yesterday. But I also know that they are currently working on the next wave of funding. So we're going to be ready. We're going to be on top of it and be able to help navigate you through that process. So keep that in mind. Then also on Monday, we are partnering with the West Metro Chamber and doing Zoom etiquette and best tips. So if you're a little intimidated by Zoom, or you think, oh, I'd love to host something and maybe do something for my clients, but I don't know how to use it, join us. We're going to go over all of the best practices and tips and functions and just how to make you look your very best on camera. So that's on Monday from 12 to 1:30. And then Tuesday from 1 to 3, Lou is teaching Bookkeeping 101. That's done in an Excel spreadsheet. Lots of Q&A happening there. And then next week we have a social media class and some other stuff. So I'm working on some other types of topics too. So if you have topics that you would like to see, please, please, please reach out to me. I'm happy to put them together for you. I'm going to send a post email out for today's talk with everybody's contact info as well as the recording. So we started recording this. We did miss, unfortunately, the first 2 intros, but we started it with Matthew. And so it's been recorded, so you can go back and refer to this. And now I'm going to turn it back over. I'll just start with Liz, and you can give us your final thoughts, and then we'll close out.
Well, first, thank you for having me on this. This was very fun today. What came to me when you were talking was I used to write 3 years to Colorado Biz Magazine online, and I had tons of articles. So I went back and I looked at the theme it was always a sales theme, but I looked at what were the things that always lit me up to write about. So look back and see if you have any blogs or articles or things that you've written. See if there's something in there that triggers something for you, and then run like hell with it.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Sure, I'll jump in, and I would say have fun. Just enjoy doing it, and that is tied to that passion element of something that jazz is. So however that works for you, just if it's a chore, you will never be able to do it for long enough to get there. So do what you need to do to have a fun time, and good luck. And thanks so much. It's been really fun chatting with you all.
Awesome. Thanks, Matthew.
And I also want to say thank you, Amira, for the invitation and for everyone who hopped on this call. I want you right now in this moment, if you have not already, to give yourself permission to write. Whatever that looks like for you. If that looks like a structured time, great. Set it in your day timer for tomorrow and the next day and the next day. If you don't want to write like that, just write when you're inspired. People write on napkins and it becomes best-selling works of art. So honor your process, whatever it is, but right now, give yourself permission to write.
Nice, lovely. Thank you, Donna. Alexandra.
That's lovely. And I would add to what the other panelists have said, small steps. If thinking about writing a book can feel really big and overwhelming, and just take it little by little. What am I going to do today? What fun thing am I going to do today that involves my story? Just break it down. Think very, very small, because that's how we eat an elephant, one bite at a time.
Perfect. Well, and I just want to say thank you all. Thank you, thank you. Matthew, Alexandra, Donna, Liz, you guys were phenomenal. I am so inspired. Like truly, I'm just on fire over here. And I'm sure our audience feels the same. And this has absolutely been one of my funnest panel workshops that I've done since we've been in shelter in place. So you guys are amazing. You rocked it. Thank you to all our participants. Watch for my email. You will get it between now and I'll say tomorrow evening. And I'll put it out. I'll have everybody's contact info in there, including their website, so you can kind of check out some of the works that they've done and connect with them. And then I'll also will include this video. and I'm going to throw it onto our Facebook page too, as well. So with that, have an
Thank
amazing
you.
weekend. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Okay.
Stay
See you guys.
safe.
Bye.
Yes.
Be well.